Oh, welcome. Welcome into another episode of the Fergus Spotlight Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Bittner, joined as always by another great guest, another great community member. This guy I'm really interested in hearing the story. I'm interested in diving into this topic. I never thought I would be doing a podcast about wild grass and native wildflowers, but here we are with Alex Blondeau.
Here we are.
With Windflower Natives. So we're going to uncover your story. A lot of people, I mentioned before the mic, a lot of people probably had influence from your dad if they were an artist growing up in Fergus Falls. I know Mr. Blondeau was a big part of the art scene, and you know, there's a lot of artists that are prevalent in our community today that have had some type of influence there. So
yeah,
I'm excited to maybe hear how he's influenced your story. I know in your bio on your website, it says you never thought you'd be into this either. You always thought you'd be an artist or something. So excited to hear your story and then get into talking about some of these different wild native flowers, grasses in our region. I know that there's I don't know exactly where the conversation's going to go. I've got some stuff. I'm excited to kind of hear what you do with Windflower Natives.
Right on.
And maybe talk about some of this stuff. So welcome in.
Oh, cool. Thank you, Jacob.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I ran into you at the farmer's market and everyone seemed interested in this topic. Lots of people want to talk about this kind of stuff when they're out there.
There's something in the air for sure.
For sure. So before we get started, I do have some sponsors to thank. Stumbeano's Coffee, Atlas Outdoor Services, Outstate Brewing. We've got some Mission Mechanical, some light beer here on the table, a new one from Outstate. Victor Lundeen's company, Fergus Home and Hardware, Liberty Business Systems, Wayne Schuett with Century 21 Atwood, Dr. Zack Chiropractic, and Elks Point Bar and Grill. So, shout out to all those sponsors. Thank you very much for supporting the show. So, Alex, you grew up in Fergus then?
I did indeed.
You did indeed.
Okay. I grew up in Elizabeth, Minnesota. So 10 miles to the west is where things really started. And it wasn't until about junior high that we moved back to Fergus Falls. So definitely was in the school district all the way through. But the first 12, 13 years of my life were out in Elizabeth.
Okay. And growing up with your dad as an artist.
Growing up with my dad as an artist and an outdoorsman. So I'm an only child. That meant when Dad had the summers off or had to go fishing or hunting, I would be the one who would have to go along with him because there was no one else on deck. So I spent a good amount of time out in the wild places in the area, walking through grass that was too tall for me and not having enough snacks. So, but yeah, no, he was a lot of into the hunting for sure. I didn't really like the hunting as much, but I think something in just being in the landscape always hung with me.
Yeah. So was your dad was in nature. He was like, you guys were always in nature on top of him being an artist.
Yep.
What kind of influence, I guess, what was your mom? What was her story? What's her story?
So she was a respiratory therapist. I remember her as being just the hardest working, most compassionate human being that I could possibly have been born into a family with. She was always getting up at 5 a.m. or 4:30 and going into the hospital to do her job. And I just couldn't fathom that because getting up early in the morning for me was the worst possible thing at that age. Deer hunting with Dad was something that always involved getting up around 5:30, and I dreaded it all year long. So the fact that she did that on such a regular basis was just amazing to me. But so we would, as a family, we also had a lake cabin out at East Lost Lake that we would go to, and I just remember her being with, she would come with on some of the hunting trips with Dad, some of the fishing trips mostly. But yeah, just a very stable and loving presence in my life.
So, what were you into in high school besides just like hunting, fishing, outdoors, super outdoorsy? Did you have like hopes and dreams or like did you have aspirations of being an artist or something when you were younger?
Yeah, good question. I actually was not into hunting and fishing in high school. The outdoor aspect in the high school period of my life had a lot to do with just exploring some of the strange, interesting places around the area. If you were my friend, you knew my places because I would always bring my friends to my places. And places included places like Broken Down Dam was always a really interesting location. I like dams. Freiburg Dam was another one. Let's see. There were always certain hills on the west side of town where the sunset really did the right thing for me, and you could see just forever. So that was just long walks, camping, a lot of just camping in little out of the way places. Towards the latter years of high school, we started doing some of our first solo trips away from home, going to the North Shore. Young life was important in my formative years during that time. So Jim Bjork would bring us out to like the Boundary Waters or out to Colorado or Montana for camping trips, and those were huge for me. When you got me in the presence of rock in particular, cliff faces, things of that sort, something in me just started to like vibrate, and I would just have to get out of the car and climb on stuff. Very, very quickly, I found myself grounded as a child on family vacations that involved rock because I would just disappear, and my parents thought I had, plunged to my death or something to that nature. But that was always, those places were very special to me. Yep.
So, when did you graduate high school?
I mean, 97.
97.
Yep.
Wow. And then, when did Windflower Natives start?
Oh, that was way down the track. We've been doing our thing now this is our third season. So this is pretty recent.
Pretty new.
Yeah.
So,
very much so.
1997, graduated high school. What did you do?
Well, I was told that if you wanted to practice your artistic proclivities, you should think about graphic design. So, engaged in a program at St. Cloud State and got a degree in graphic design. It was an interesting degree. I enjoyed it for the most part, and then quickly found myself among the few that did get a job after the degree working in advertising. And I did that. Did I do it for 5 years? 4 or 5 years. And boy, it was not what my spirit was looking for. It was kind of the worst of what you would expect, like having to create slick artistic designs for things that didn't really move you, and just do that wash, rinse, and repeat over and over again. And it wasn't my thing. So.
Hey, advertising, you have to be able to adapt if you're gonna, like, especially in graphic design, like if you're making imaging for a business or flyers for businesses. A lot of people do that on Canva now.
Yep.
They've made it so they've taken the barrier of entry into that away, basically, with like Canva. Sure. But it's hard to tell somebody else's message. You have to be really passionate about, you have to believe in what they believe in to tell their message,
right.
So you didn't make it very long in a career as a graphic designer.
Right. Yep. Yeah, no, but I worked with some interesting people who had just interesting points of view on life, and I found that very, very stimulating. I think the thing that I enjoyed the most about just going to work was just spending time with my coworkers and asking the deep questions about life and sorting through things like that. So that's where I ended up going into a philosophy of religion degree, and then further on into a PhD in theology at Luther Seminary in St. Paul.
Interesting. I didn't know that was gonna. I would have prepared differently if I would have known that you. So you have a theology degree. You're a theologian.
I'm a theologian. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I've had my friend Taylor. I have a friend, Taylor Gray, actually my boss's son.
Yep.
And he's a professor out at Penn State. I don't know if you've met Taylor or not. I've had him on the show a couple times, but I really enjoy having those conversations with those people who want to go down religious rabbit holes or any of that stuff. So maybe that'll be for a different episode.
Perhaps.
But fill me in on that part of your life then.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
and maybe it is still a big part of your life. I don't know.
It is, but when you go through that level of theological education, the whole structure of the way things are put together for you shifts pretty dramatically. And so it's definitely the core for me. I mean, the core really is thinking about just what are the areas of separation in our life as we come into this experience, and where is the presence of reunion or reintegration? And that's me speaking in very broad and abstract terms. But the way that this all traces back into what I'm doing now is there's something about being human that makes you, able to make tools of things, imagine possibilities for things that are not just given in their experience. And part of what that means is we find a way as human creatures to be separated from the natural environment. Like we think of ourselves very commonly as, well, that's man-made over against that's natural, right? And so when you look at an entire society and an entire culture that is built on that kind of a hard division between what is human and what is natural, some interesting things occur from that. So like one of the interesting things is that when Western society moved into this continent, we saw a whole world of things that we could do with it. Like the entire landscape was viewed as something that you could do something with, something that you could use, something that you could like put to a higher use is what the folks thought. And the higher use of the area that we live in on the edge of the Red River Valley was farmland. And so that's what happened. I mean, the natural systems that were in place for millennia quickly became co-opted into the production of food and that kind of thing, which you can look at that and go, well, that's good. You know, it was good for us. People need to eat, and that's great. But there's something that you lose in the process of doing that. And I'm kind of interested in that.
Yeah. That very much so then there is that religious base tied into that, like everything that is here. What do they say? Like 99% of everything that's been on the planet has gone extinct or something, something like that. Yeah. And I don't know what that is for like plant life. I know that there's like, I think mycelium is probably like one of the oldest things that you can trace back. Like the mushroom is probably like the oldest thing that we know of, supposedly. But, and I don't know how much you know about this, but I'm certainly we lost or are losing out on a lot of the natural, region specific. I mean, we have things that are specific to our region. You can probably talk on a little bit more that have gone extinct, plant life or close to it.
Sure. And so like when we're talking about my high school or college years, when I'm off camping in places like the North Shore and things of that sort, being in places where there's no roads on a grid, where there's, waterfalls aren't corralled by concrete, where things are in a certain sense doing their own thing, always made me feel a lot, just excited, alive. And I always wanted to be in those places. And then to come home for me felt rather boring by comparison. Being in the boxes that we build and driving on the grids that we make are efficient and nice and convenient and safe, but I didn't feel as alive in those places. So it always felt like I had to go somewhere, right? And I always had to drive to the North Shore of Lake Superior or drive west to the mountains to have that experience. And it was, I don't know, probably, I always forget the date. It was probably like 10, 12 years ago. I was just out for a run, just on a trail run here west of town. Actually, it was in Ferber Park, kind of right where I live now. And it was in April, and I had stopped to tie my shoe. I tell this story 100 times, but I stopped to tie my shoe, and there was a purple flower growing from the ground. Everything around was completely dormant. There were no things growing of any sort, but there's this furry purple flower coming out of the ground. And I didn't have any idea what I was looking at. And as I spent some time researching, I discovered that it was a pasque flower, a word that I'd never heard before. It's the first native flower to bloom in the spring. So it blooms on remnant prairie hillsides around April 8th into the early portions of March or May. And what I discovered is that this was a little remnant prairie, right? And remnant prairie, what does that mean? These are just little chunks of land that were never turned into agriculture. And there's very, very few of them left. What is it? They say 1-ish% of remnant prairie exists in western Minnesota from what was previous pre-colonial times. And this captured my imagination. I started to realize that here, right where I live, there were these little fragments that were still wild, right? That still had this spirit that that got me excited in these places that I used to travel to. So that put me on a path of lots of little adventures around Otter Tail County and the surrounding region.
So were you, after you got your like theological degree or your PhD,
Yeah.
what did you do for like a job? What were you doing for a career for that
Right.
period of time before?
Yeah. So I didn't go into theology at a good time, career-wise.
What year was that?
Oh, I finished it in 2016, I want to say.
And why is that a bad time? To go
It
into
was a bad
theology?
time because just the whole landscape was changing. The institutions that previously would have been there to hire someone like me and pay me to do my job were having to sell off property just to stay afloat. Faculty was being laid off. It was just not a good scene for trying to go get a job. So we decided, at the time we were living in Rice, Minnesota, kind of north
You
of
got
St.
married
Cloud.
somewhere along the line?
Somewhere along the line, yeah. That's
Somewhere along the line.
2001, I got married. So we had 2 kids at that point, and we just knew that we didn't want to have small children and chase all over the countryside looking for adjunct, no benefits sorts of temporary teaching positions. So we decided that we would move back to Fergus Falls from central Minnesota and start our life here. And for us, that consisted in buying a little chunk of land where we currently live, and started to build our own home. So that was in 2017, I believe. We started digging the hole in the ground, and that was, I don't know, a couple years. Yeah, I think year and a half or something like that of just nonstop building a home to live in. And then once it was livable, by no means finished, but at least livable. Yeah. I decided to take a job reading electrical meters for Otter Tail Power.
There you go, meter reader.
Yeah, meter reader. What a weird job that still existed at all.
I'm actually surprised that I feel like those days are numbered for meter readers.
Oh, they're gone.
They're gone
it's a
now.
thing. I think it was just last year they finally shut it down completely.
Figured it out. It's like, yeah, I don't know if there's like you need like a physical contingency of reading it physically there. I don't get that. I don't understand how all that stuff wasn't on the grid already.
Yeah,
but it's interesting.
Yeah, it strangely suited me. Sort of a
active job.
Yeah,
I had I think I had Dave Jensen on at one point, and he said he did that job too. He's super just like he probably ran and
They hired him after me. So that suited me. I mean, I'm sort of an introvert, and that's a very you don't have to deal with people in that job. Adventurous, out in all sorts of weather, and for me, it's also you get these weird rural routes that you'd travel once every month, all year long, and you see things changing, and I had started to start looking for these remnant prairies. I started to learn how to recognize the texture of a place and realize where a good possibility might be. And so when you're done with your route and you're on your way home, you're like, I'll pop in here and see what's happening. And I got to know a lot of little, oftentimes just ditches, railroad rights of way, things of this sort, that some cool native remnant prairie stuff was happening. And so when you show up in one of these spaces in intervals throughout the year, you realize that they're never the same. There's always something new going on, something new is expressing. And that was really exciting for me. So yeah, the meter reading thing was, I did that from 2017 until, I can't remember now. It's been 5 years ago, so something like that. So yeah, it was a good 4 years or something like that. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. So
then, you said Windflower has been around since around 2021.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you've kind of been just jumping around, just kind of doing a bunch of different stuff.
I have been, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so after the meter reading, I went to work for an organization called United Prairie Foundation. Folks in the area may know of them.
So that's kind of the stepping stone then.
Yeah. Well, honestly, it was a weird one because I was falling in love with these spaces, and I was like, you know what? I know this meter reading thing is not going to be going on much longer. What should I do next? Okay, and I'm sure, just bracket here, some of you may be thinking, why does he get to do this? Why does he get to just poke around at whatever just sorts of strikes his fancy here?
Yeah, I'm curious. I mean,
and
I don't ever ask.
Yeah.
Some people have financial blessings, and I try not to get into like people's financial blessings, if they want to share them,
No, I'm very fortunate in that my wife also went into graphic arts, and she ended up with a good gig working remotely for a company in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
And so that was part of the big reason we were able to move from central Minnesota to Fergus Falls at all, is that she was able to work remotely. And that has been that, and like I do everything myself. We build our own house, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And we're just kind of frugal folks. So we were able to kind of swing this thing where I had a little bit more flexibility in where I was going with stuff. And
I figure your dad being an art teacher, maybe you had some massive inheritance in somewhere.
Those art teachers. That's how it often goes. But he was bad with his money, and it's all gone. No, yeah. And so I decided, like, hey, maybe I could start a native nursery or something. But there was part of the problem was I'd never been to a native nursery. I didn't know anything about horticulture, but not one to let that stop me. I thought I would just, I could make a website, right? I'd done this before. I had once had a business that ran for, 15 years where I built motorcycle seats. And that started simply because I was a graphic designer. I knew how to make a website. And if you put yourself out there and appear to be someone legitimate, people show up and ask you to do something. Well, then you figure it out at that point. So,
right.
So I knew I'd kind of had a pattern. We're like, well, I can make a website. It looks kind of good. And I thought, well, I'll learn how to do it as I go. And so I thought first step is maybe I should just go to one of these, right? So I went to Enderlin, North Dakota, where John DeVries, who's the owner or the president of United Prairie Foundation, has his greenhouse, and just presented myself as someone who's like, I'm just interested in this. Like, I would like to do this some on my own, and I would like to just see what it's like. And he held up a little plant. He goes, you know what this is? And I said, wow. It's like a heart-leafed Alexander. He goes, you should come work for me. And I said, no, I don't want to. I want to do my own thing. But he was very persistent and kept sending cool photos and images and videos of the projects they were working on. I thought, you know what, this is an education waiting. I should just do it for a while and see what I can get from it. So I jumped in and worked with them, and it was fantastic to work with so many people in the fish and wildlife agencies and get to see up close and firsthand so much of what larger scale restoration and conservation work looks like.
Where's that large scale stuff going on?
I mean, there's a lot of it going on around just in WPAs and WMAs around.
What is that WPA, WMA?
That's a wildlife protection
area,
and that would be a federally owned chunk of land. WMAs are wildlife management areas; those are state level, run by the DNR.
Yep.
And so, behind the scenes, unless you're someone who hunts these places, most people don't know they exist or what's on them or what they're like. And even hunters tend to only go there during certain times of the year when their waterfowl or pheasants or what have you are active or in season. Mm-hmm. But there's also people who care about the land just as such in the process of conservation there as well. And so there's a lot of work being done to regenerate degraded landscapes, areas that have been possibly even seeded or had restoration work done on them years ago, but it was at that time done in a very low diverse ecosystem kind of way. So just a handful of grasses and flowers. And now the recognition of the benefits of just having incredible amounts of diversity in the restoration work is taking hold. So some of that work is going in to try to continue to bring in higher levels of diversity for pollinator health.
Right. And this is all about the bees. I mean, this all ties into the bees, and it is though, right? I mean, that's a huge part of why we're afraid the bees are going away is because we're taking away all of this native pollinators. So you've got butterflies and bees and all of these creatures that rely on all of this native stuff. So the idea of a nursery, for the people that aren't familiar with that, it's pretty basic. You're taking and producing these wild native flowers, grasses, and then moving them to another area and trying to kind of bring back that native restore that native land.
Sure. I mean, there's different ways of looking at this, and I'm not the best person to speak on the topic of just the ecological role of all this in terms of like bee health, pollinator health, how it impacts our food systems, carbon sequestration, like all this kind of stuff that folks are rightfully paying attention to. And this is just my temperament. I look at that and I go, this is just another way of looking at this as if it's something to use again. Like, how do we do it so that it helps us in some way or another?
Right. We actually, in the last episode, and I want to pause, but we talked about the idea of carbon credits a little bit. And specifically, I was talking to Nate Cundy at Ottertail Power, and we were talking about how everyone's trying to go carbon neutral by 2030. And a lot of that stuff, where those carbon credits come from are probably projects like these restoration. I'm assuming these restoration projects, you can claim a certain amount of carbon displacement from bringing back. You know, like if you haven't done much research into that, you should, because I bet you could make a ton of extra money just by. I bet you could sell these if you're helping the planet. You could for sure create a carbon credit and sell it to some corporation who's destroying the planet.
Yeah. Oh, this is beautiful. I feel like I'm in advertising again. Oh. Yeah, no,
but it is a crazy industry, though.
Sure.
It's wild.
Sure. Yeah. And prairie restoration work in general is very well suited to that, simply because of the way the plant structure works, where it puts all of its energy into the root system. And so much of it just goes underground. So, I mean, there's a legitimate reason to pay attention to that kind of stuff. For me, though, it just doesn't hook me.
That's fair. So you were working for this larger operation. And then you worked with them up until you're like, you know what, I'm going to do this on my own? Or was there another career step in between?
It's sort of a fade off. You know, I still do work for them.
Okay.
So we do. I mean, one of the major threats facing our remaining grassland habitat is just the way that trees and brush continue to encroach into them. So, you know, in the before times, before we showed up and put fences up and made the fires stop and killed all the bison and that kind of good stuff that we did at the turn of the century, the grasslands were heavily grazed by large herbivores. There were regular regimes of fire that would come through, both naturally caused and used by the Native Americans, both for trying to attract animal life, because freshly burned growth is more nutritious and easier to eat than old scrubby stuff. So the Native Americans would also use it for warfare and things like that. So there's always fire in the landscape. There were always large herbivores, and that would just have a tendency to knock back trees and brush from sort of doing the natural succession from grassland into scrubland into forest. So when we stopped those things, when we annihilated them in various ways, now wherever there's a tree, it makes seeds, and they fall into the grassland, and then they start making seedlings, and it really doesn't take that long. And that which was once perhaps a remnant prairie that had been there for tens of thousands of years turns into a thicket, turns into a forest, oftentimes buckthorn, and
buckthorn is the big invasive
that's
species.
a baddie.
It's bad.
Yeah, we don't like that, and that's just one of many. So, but one of the things that we would do then is we come in with a machine skid steer, and it's got a big giant hydraulic scissor on the front, and it's got an onboard sprayer, so we spray a herbicide right onto the stump to just knock back. You know, we're being the bison, or we're being the fire in those circumstances.
The bison would eat the buckthorn?
No, it's just, they would, these herds were so massive, right? I mean, they would just trample things, and probably eat them too. I don't know. But between the fire and the large herbivores and stuff, just the forest margins just had a check on them in a way that they don't now. So unless the agencies are able to go out and regularly burn, which is expensive, requires lots of manpower, and as you may have heard, federal and money, especially for folks to go out and continue to do conservation work, is really not easy to be had in the current regime of things. So that is it remains to be seen how much effort we're going to have left to continue to do that kind of work. But while I've been working there, that's one of the things that I get to do is help to kind of push back the forest margin on some of these remnants.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So talk about the startup of this Windflower Natives, the branding behind it. Where'd the name come from?
Yeah. So we're 3 years in now. Let's see, branding. You want to know about the branding of it? So I mean that ties back into the story of me kind of finding my first little hint of a remnant prairie, kind of right where I lived, and that was the pasque flower in Latin. Then it's the anemone patens, and the anemone portion of that goes back to the Greek, which there's a whole mythology of anemone and her story, but really it amounts to daughter of the wind. So the anemone patens, and I also have a thing for thimbleweed for some reason, which is also an anemone. It's an anemone cylindrica. It's just an interesting plant. I get a kick out of both of them. So I like the idea of windflower, and I also like the places where I tend to find these plants. These are species that tend to grow in dry, kind of gravelly hillsides. So I just always have these memories of early April and being on these windy, cold hillsides in the spring, and then you find these furry little flowers that are these memories of an ecosystem that is, largely lost, but there's still little hints of it. And something in that just kind of like hits me just right. So it works for me. It may not work great from a branding perspective because everybody calls me Wildflower Natives. Yeah, I know. Nobody knows what a windflower is. There are species of flowers that are more commonly referred to as windflowers, but they tend to grow further south and not in Minnesota. So nobody's really heard of that word, but they've heard of wildflowers. So I answer to both.
Is the idea then, and I'm curious to uncover the services or what you do. Obviously, I've seen you at the farmer's market selling these things. And then do you do more like, are you looking at getting these in people's yards, pollinators in people's yards? Like, tell me what it is that you do.
Sure. So I'm learning that as I go. And what I've learned is I came into it at a decent time. And that was because the state was giving money to folks through a Lawns to Legumes program, which is a weird name for a program that doesn't
Lawns to what?
Legumes?
Legumes.
Like beans.
Okay.
So it doesn't have a lot to do with beans as such. It's more to do with pollinator support, like you were mentioning earlier. So it's helping address issues of fragmentation in native pollinator habitat. So it's helping
the bottle gentian.
Yes.
Is that important? Is that one of our native? That one tells me the bumblebees like that one.
They do like that one, the bottle gentian. They like to disappear into it. So it's also called a closed gentian. So when you see it, it's like a little blue capsule, and the bumblebees will crawl into it and rummage around and disappear. So
you said you're still kind of figuring out what.
Well, no, it's panned out, but now it's changing very quickly. So there's that program, and folks will get about $400, and it's funded now through next spring. So I have folks that are currently placing orders for their fall round, and then next spring they'll have one more chance, and then it's not going to be funded anymore. And that will be then a big transition moment for us, because probably 50% of what we do has been from money through that program. Okay. So it's really helped to get us started. Like we're doing some infrastructure work now. Like I was mentioning to you earlier, we're building a smaller high tunnel on the property, so we have a more dedicated growing space that's not quite so homemade, and that's good. But we're going to have to transition. So there's that chunk of the business. Another piece of it that I've been doing is participating in a kind of a more of a helper sense for some of the large scale restoration work that I was telling you about. Because I'm not going to ever be set up to do, a 100-acre restoration project. But what I can do is bring in and augment something that the larger practices of restoration can't really get into very well. And that is, there's certain species that just don't manifest well from just seed mixes, either because it's hard to get a hold of the seed, or even if you can get a hold of it, it doesn't germinate well from being just scattered out in the normal manner or drilled in with agricultural equipment. But some of them are have their own unique ecological value and just sort of capture the hearts of folks in general. And they just will never show up on a normal large scale restoration. So things like the downy gentian is one of them. Hoary puccoons, wood lilies. There's a whole handful of these kind of hard to grow, hard to find species that I just get a kick out of trying to figure out the puzzle of how to propagate them and do the horticulture thing with. So I will go in to some of these fish and wildlife properties, and I will like plant in hundreds of pasque flowers on some of the dry, gravelly hillsides where they have a little money left over in the grant for that particular piece, and I will help facilitate some of that. I did some work up on, I think it was called Hamden Slough up by Audubon with the Becker County Soil and Water folks. So I put in a bunch of wood lilies, wood betonies, and they're going to get some pasque flowers up there too. So that's another chunk where I will come in and work with a larger restoration effort. And I find that to be super rewarding kind of stuff too.
So I never will miss out on an opportunity to dive into the political side of something, because, I mean, it's what you got to do if you're on the talk radio, right? But talk about the realities of it. I mean, I don't know what was in this, the great, big, beautiful bill. I don't know what was in it necessarily. I'm learning more and more as time goes on, kind of different takeaways from it. But that bill, I don't know if that one specifically, I know there's been lots of talks of defunding, climate initiatives specifically.
Sure.
So much of your work wouldn't get done if it weren't for these grant funds or these funds that trickle down through and back to the people that do it. So talk about the political landscape a little bit. What's the future look like for that if we don't continue to invest in it? Do you think there's reason to believe that we're done investing in it for a little bit?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's not a great time to be involved in working for underserved things in general, like that either ecologically or
if you're underserved, you're screwed. We're not serving anyone who's underserved.
Kind of how it feels. Yeah. And I'm not really, I see this as an observer, right?
Right.
I see this from the perspective of like folks that I have worked with in the agencies aren't there anymore because of how things have changed. They've either taken, a buyout or, retired early or what have you. Some were in their probationary period. They were starting a vocation that they were excited about, and then that was downsized. So that's hard to see. I work in spaces that are largely forgotten, right? Like these, I talk about these weird little remnant ditches or things like that I've fallen in love with. People don't go to these places. They don't really know what they are. And part of the joy for me is helping people see them. But my point is when you have this whole area that folks don't have right in front of them, and it's hard for them to get their arms around, and there's funding that happens from a government level to help support what's left of these places, which I feel is a pretty important thing for government to do, to step into places where just strictly the wheels of commerce aren't going to make this stuff hang around, stuff that doesn't have a very obvious capital interest to it, but there's still a common sense of goodness.
Well,
to
and
it.
if the government doesn't do it, then it kind of falls on the shoulders of the philanthropists and stuff like that. And I know that's where a lot of grant money does come from philanthropy as well. There's a certain combination of it that trickles down from all different sources. But ultimately, you have to look at what the government is responsible for, and is preserving our land one of them? Well, it probably should be,
Yeah, it should be, but we don't have a great track record with that, if I may return our minds to showing up here at all, and especially over the course of, from the 1850s into the, 1940s, just to watch the entire landscape just completely change. Like we are sitting on a cultural legacy of not not really paying attention to the natural spaces that we have available to us. There have been movements from, John Muir and the folks that started the Sierra Club and that kind of an awareness, but it's always been a fight.
And thank goodness we saved some of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I spent a summer in Grand Teton National Park. I was fortunate enough to spend a summer there.
Yep.
And you want to talk about wild prairies, like going out and like, I mean, you get everything there. You get the forest, but then you get out into those prairies and seeing like the lupines and like all the different, I mean, I really, really got into flowers and different kinds of grasses just that were regionally specific.
Sure.
Because when you spend time out in nature and you're observant, it's like, wow, this stuff is really, really cool.
Yeah.
I haven't grown to appreciate coming back to Minnesota as much once you're in those areas. So I'd be interested to know where, and maybe we can talk about that. Ferber Park being one of the places that you can go and kind of get a little bit of this experience. The prairie wetlands. I mean, what's the role in the prairie wetlands and all of this?
Yeah. You're starting to talk my language there a little bit. Like once you end up in these places, there's something that moves in us when we are able to be in these natural spaces. And oftentimes, obviously the ones that we have left and that we put a lot of effort into preserving have typically this sort of immense kind of grandeur to them, right? Like the Tetons you mentioned, you get within sight of them and just you can't help but be moved by them. And here I am out here talking about these little ditches and things that you can go ripping by on the highway and never know they exist. But there's still that element of being in the presence of these life systems that have been doing their thing together for so many eons. That makes me feel more alive, more connected, more human. Now, as to your question of where does the prairie wetlands fit in all this, for us, just on a personal note, it was one of the reasons that we moved back to Fergus Falls, because our kids were at an age where if we were to move back when we did, they would be able to participate in the educational opportunities that are afforded there. And to watch your kids have a chunk of time every day where they're bust out to the Prairie Wetlands Learning Center, and they begin their time having to like sit quietly and observe for 20 minutes or whatever. Fantastic. Like that is something that should be built into all of our educational systems, and it's a bummer that it kind of has to stop at that certain period of time too. But to have the entire local population of youth exposed to the natural richness.
How does that program work? They just bust the kids there?
Yeah. You don't know how
I don't know too much about that program.
Yeah.
I've never interviewed anyone from the prairie wetlands. So that would be a really good interview probably to dive into them and their programs. But what's your experience been with their programs? How do they work?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I forget even what the grades are that the kids are out there. If they have for two grades out of their grade school years, they're able to spend half the day out at the Prairie Wetlands Learning Center. Wow. So as it currently stands, they're bussed out from Kennedy and spend half the day there and get bussed back. That was part of the reason there was the push to build the new school across the highway from it and have the tunnels so that you would be able to have the natural educational aspect of it and the school be right next to each other, and they could be even more integrated, which would have been super cool.
That's where they were pushing to build the school out there. Oh, man, that would have been cool.
Yeah, it would have been real cool. So maybe someday.
We can't have nice things. I'm just kidding. So I guess let's go back to trying to understand your business a little bit, what the community can do. Obviously, people, like I said, when I ran into you at the farmer's market, there was just like tons of people there, just like, and it was a busy morning, but like everyone was asking questions. And so like people can participate in this grant program still. Is it too late to?
They do have one more shot. They can get in on the one that is going to be closing here. I forget what the date is.
And but that basically allows them to get like a kit
No, they
Or-
get reimbursed.
They
So
get
then
reimbursed.
what Lawns to Legumes does and will continue to do is to help connect people that are interested in ecological gardening, which is gardening with the focus of doing something positive for the native ecology. So they're going to try to help continue to facilitate relationships between people who are interested in that and those who are growing and helping with the educational materials for actually implementing that. And so what I tend to do with the homeowners who are interested in that is I have kits, but I also have individual species of many sorts that are all native to this region. So native that like I have personally handpicked the seed the year prior to in remnants that are still existing, oftentimes again, ditches, railroad rights of ways and things of this sort. So so I will grow this life that has been here long before we were and help folks implement that into their gardening. So
Wow.
that's the simplest way to say it.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And obviously people can invest in this and choose to support this without getting a refund, but
Yeah.
that program is around if for up
Yeah.
to $400 of or whatever of an investment.
Yeah.
It sounds like. So but otherwise, I mean, if you're if you got a cabin, if you're a homeowner in
Yep.
town, it doesn't
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter if you have a yard, right?
Sure.
I've had lawn care. I've had some really interesting conversations on this show. And we talked, one of them was about like lawn care and how like just crazy what a crazy phenomenon it is in the United States here that we just have like this grass,
Yep.
just like grass in our yards. It's like it's a very, very crazy phenomenon. So why? I mean, like that you could start replacing what could people do to start replacing just some of the space in their yard with something like a simple step someone could take?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's the beauty of it is that you can always do more. So like, I think the day that you came to visit me in the farmer's market, I had a few people standing around and I get people who are very excited about this and they say, I want to rip up my yard. I want to rip up the whole thing. And, and I always get a little nervous because I go, it's a big project. Rip up your yard and make it look like something that you would want to live in and that your neighbors would want to be around.
Right.
It's not easy to just take random plants and create something that has some aesthetic to it at the same time. So, so I always suggest to folks, start small, or you can also work in with gardening planters and garden spaces that you currently have. There's no reason that native plants can't play well with more of the horticultural kind of stuff out there. So that's also a possibility. But otherwise, I mean, for folks who just want to take like, I don't know, a 10 by 10 foot chunk of their yard just to start, I do have an entire step-by-step kit on the website, or not kit, but a guide that talks about how to just go ahead and prepare a chunk of your land and make it suitable for a native planting. So,
Gotcha. Yeah. Good job with the website. Yeah. All that information is available there at windflowernatives.com. Is that right?
You got it.
All right. So before we get out of here, I want to talk a little bit about specifically, you mentioned the Pask flower. Pask, is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Pask. And then the bottle gentian. A few more of these like that were like really, really trying to preserve here. And I don't know if this is my assistant, so I don't know where ChatGPT's at on all this stuff, but it mentions the prairie violet.
Yeah.
Is that it says essential food for source for the butterflies and caterpillars. That's a big one for the butterflies. And then you mentioned the hoary pucoon.
Hoary pucoon.
Hoary pucoon.
Yeah.
Talk about what's the significance of that one.
Wow, it's just pretty.
It's just pretty. It's just a pretty one.
So yeah, in the spring is this is where oftentimes in restorations you won't really see anything happen. So in a piece of land that has been seeded or sown with native prairie plants, in the spring it's going to look super drab, and that is usually because where they get the seed from to do these restorations is from combine harvests from a remnant prairie somewhere. But you're not doing that in April. You're not doing that in May. They do it once and they do it in the fall. So pretty much the base seed that they're going to get from that is going to be species that bloom and create their seeds later in the year. So you just won't see much. So when you're driving around a true remnant, you will see things happening. You'll see something yellow in the ditch, or you'll see something purple. And it will be the yellow one oftentimes is the hoary puccoon. It's a very early blooming species. So the insects and pollinators that have their entire life cycles synced up with these flowers, in a remnant, they will have floral resources to work with.
So really the early season pollinators are the ones that like are really important to preserve. I mean, there's obviously different early, late, but like if you don't have those pollinators there when the insects have been
if the flowers aren't there, the insects won't be there either.
Correct.
Right. Exactly.
Interesting.
Yep.
The fringe gentian, and these all have crazy scientific names too. I think it'd be good content for me to try to pronounce one of these, but it is the gentian Opsis carinthia. Wow.
Yeah.
I don't even know. These are some crazy, I don't know what, do you know where the root language of this stuff even comes from?
It's Latin.
It's all Latin.
Yeah.
Okay. But this one is on decline across the Midwest. It says there's still some strongholds in certain areas of Minnesota, but this is one that they say is at risk of going away too.
Yep.
So, otherwise, do you deal with grasses as well? I mean, natural grasses, the ones it mentions here, you can talk about it if you want, but the big blue stem, little blue stem, we have side oats, grama, prairie drop seed, Indian grass.
Yeah.
You want to talk about the grasses a little bit?
So, I mean, what is oftentimes thought by folks just getting into this space is that prairie just means grass. And I remember speaking, like, even when I was first getting interested in it, people were talking to me about seed mixes, and they were talking about different percentages of flowers to include in the mix. I'm like, I have flowers. I don't really care about the flowers. I just want the prairie grasses. But then you get into a really actual high quality remnant prairie, and you realize, there's grasses all over the place, and they're very neat, but there's so much more going on in there. But it is the case that prairies are grass-dominated landscapes. There's the big three. You mentioned the big blue stem, the little blue stem, Indian grass is another one of them, are very common. I tend to specialize in more of the shorter species just because folks are doing smaller pollinator gardens. And if you put a big blue stem in a small pollinator garden, over time, they will get gigantic and start to become probably more unwieldy than helpful in a smaller context. So the prairie drop seed is one that I grow a lot of. It's just a beautiful, I always think it looks like a troll's head that has been buried in the ground with green hair, because it just has this really kind of whimsical, very fine leaves. That's a lovely one too. So the little blue stem, side oats, blue grama is another one too. I call that one eyebrow grass because the seed heads look like little eyebrows. They're very cool. So
is this green grass? Is it green? Is it like most of it's green?
Yeah, well, it depends. It depends on the time of year too.
And what do you like when you hear people like putting like clover in their yards or replacing their yards with could you replace your entire, again, lot of work, crazy amount of work, but like what are most lawns? Like what kind of grass is like most of our lawns?
Yeah, Kentucky bluegrass.
Bluegrass, not native.
Different kinds of fescues are in there.
Not a native wild. No. So why wouldn't we use a native grass?
Largely because they are oftentimes warm season and they're bunch grasses, and so it wouldn't give you that kind of golf coursey texture that people kind of get excited about.
Gotcha. It's aesthetics.
It's not that there's none that will do that. Like blue grama I mentioned is a very short grass that can be fairly well behaved in a lawn environment and tolerates some traffic. And it's oftentimes used in more eco lawn mixes like that. But oftentimes native grasses tend to be just larger. They get kind of bunches. They make big chunks of them, and they just don't work as a lawn. It wouldn't be great to walk on or play baseball on or things like that.
Interesting. Do you do a lot of you mentioned kind of some consultation stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Do you go give like talks on this stuff? Like, have you ever gone and like done presentations on this stuff or got into that kind of work?
Yeah. I mean, they're not paying, but
they don't pay me.
No, when I get asked, I tend to show up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yep. So the last couple of years I've done, what is it? What do we call it? Getting started with natives at the Fergus Falls Public Library in the spring.
Okay.
We've done that as part of the Earth Day events. Just sort of talking about just how to take a piece of your lawn and to manageably do an ecological planting with it. Yep.
Yeah. So obviously tons of information on windflowernatives.com. There's a contact information on there, way to get a hold of you if people have more questions or you can order kits directly off there. It says a kit, but do they actually order the seeds? You'll sell like the seeds in the kit?
No seeds. No seeds. So we are seasonal. We try to have our plants ready twice a year.
All like
the middle of
like you'll sell like a little plant to someone, then like transport the plant in for them.
No. What's your question, Jake?
Sorry, I'm asking about like what like the kit, because it says online these kits.
Yeah.
But you mentioned it's more of like a guide.
No, okay. There's two different things that go on there.
Okay.
So I do have a guide that's just a PDF or a web page that'll talk you through the process of doing the work. The kit is actually either 16 or 50 species, depending on which kit you pick, and that will be the plants themselves,
Like starter plants.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. They're plugs. They're 4.5-inch deep plugs, or they come in 2.5-inch pots, depending on which one you get. And those are ready either the middle of May.
I was going to say clones, but that's probably not the right term for this. Maybe it is. Maybe.
Not the way I do these. No, these are from seed. We're not growing orchids here. But so yeah, I have them ready the middle of May or the middle of September. And people
I'll be talking to you about some horticulture.
And people just pre-order prior to that. So pre-orders for the spring starts in January, and pre-orders for the fall stuff is currently ongoing. So people will place an order, and then I will then grow and have ready to be either picked up or shipped.
Do you have pretty limited supply then? Do you?
At this point, it's very limited. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm probably working with maybe 300 square feet of greenhouse space.
Okay.
And that's why we're doing the construction project.
So
right
future expansions, what is that gonna? Are we looking at doubling your space?
About that, a little bit more than that. Yeah.
Okay.
But I've gotten into this to try to learn how the work feels and how much space is necessary to do the amount of work that feels good for the amount of bodies that I plan to be working with, namely not many or two. I don't want to grow or become large or have lots of staff and things of that sort. I just don't have the real estate for it or probably the temperament.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we've found the amount of square footage that would really work well for us, and that's what we're going to shoot for.
As far as how we move forward, we mentioned a little bit about the political side of things, how it seems like conservation efforts in general are kind of being maybe put on the back burner through this administration a little bit. What can be done locally here, maybe at a county, and obviously funding trickles down, the county funds and the city funds, but what can be done locally here within the county or the city to create more sustainability here or more programs for people to participate in?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm probably not real great at having all the answers to that one. I mean, there's always the simply just be involved in the political process, because the folks that have the money that we give to them to spend, it makes a difference. And then beyond that, it's participating with those who are doing the work in the areas that you care about. There is obviously the Prairie Wetlands Learning Center. There's United Prairie Foundation. I'm doing the work here too. And I just find the places where the good is moving and be a part of it.
You don't go speak at city council meetings or any of that stuff?
I'm not really well positioned for that.
Just stay. Yeah, it's just it's not worth it. Don't do it. Don't get into it.
No.
Just save the bees. Just focus on saving the bees.
Yeah.
But anyways, I cannot say enough how much I appreciate you coming on. Do you feel like there's any topics that you wanted to talk about or go a little deeper on at all before we got out of here?
No, I didn't come in with an agenda, so I don't.
No agenda. We talked. We filled our time.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you ever wanted to come on, I mean, I always tell people I'm always interested in deep diving on some weird topics. So I feel like you've got a lot. Like if I could go into, it would be really, really fun to do a deep dive on how our region has changed. I mean, I've talked about the history of Fergus Falls a little bit.
Sure.
I did a dive into the history of Fergus Falls with Chris Schulke and kind of talking about how it was founded, but before the people were here and what the land was when the natives were around or
so on that point, I will say just to anyone who's listening, if you have not seen the Bell History Museum's documentary series called The History of the Land, punch that baby into YouTube. It's I don't know, 4 or 5 different parts to it, and it goes everywhere from, you know, the glacial geological aspects of this, you know, the state of Minnesota, all the way through some of the early conservation work that was done trying to preserve the boundary waters against development and things of that, all the way up to current land use. And so that was, for me, it just put into a nice tight package, just the kind of the massive change that this area has gone through.
What was the name of it?
The History, I think it's just A History or The History of the Land by the Bell History Museum. I think.
Okay, maybe I'll have to watch it and we'll do a podcast about it or something at some point, because that sounds very, very interesting. So, well, I appreciate you so much. Appreciate all the listeners. Appreciate the sponsors of the show: Stumbeano's, Atlas Outdoor Services, Outstate Brewing, Victor Lundeens, Fergus Home and Hardware, Liberty Business Systems, Wayne Schuett with Century 21 Atwood, Dr. Zack Chiropractic, and Elks Point Bar and Grill. So thank you guys very much.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. Appreciate it all.
Thanks, Jacob.